Welcome again to Season 4 of What I Did Next from A&T Media. I'm your host, Malak Fuad. My guests on the show are leaders in their fields from across the Middle East who reflect on their life's pivot points. There's something for everyone here. This season we have entrepreneurs, doctors, designers, journalists, innovators, and much more. Today my guest is someone I've admired for a long time. She's the pint-sized dynamo who makes up 1/4 of the Mo4 network of companies, Amy Mowafi. Amy and her team are the digital publishers of CairoScene, ElFasla, StartUpScene, NFTYScene, NFTY Arabia, SceneNoise, SceneTraveller, SceneEats, CairoZoom, and the SceneNOW App. The Mo4 group also houses a digital creative agency representing the region's leading brands, and they are now looking to lead the way into the Web3 universe as well. Amy and I talk about all this and much more during our conversation today. Amy brings passion, authenticity, and a sense that anything is possible to everything she does. She is a fierce proponent of what our generation used to call girl power and is awed by how Gen Z women have given that voice full throttle. Amy is too modest to say it, but she's a role model for the young generation of empowered Egyptian and Arab women. We begin our episode as always with one of our icebreakers. When was the last time you did something for the first time?
The pandemic, ended up being very pivotal for me in that respect. So a very good friend of mine, Omar Samra, who I know you've also had on the show.
We know very well on the show. Absolutely.
Omar gave me a call quite early on in the pandemic, and he had this idea that we would go and basically just hang out on the beach in Marsa Alam for no explicit purpose or with no objective. We're just going to go to Marsa Alam. And I don't know, and it seems like such an innocuous thing, but the amount of anxiety that this idea caused in my mind.
But why was that? Was it because you would be missing work?
This was the crazy thing, right? Because everyone is working from home, which is what Omar said to me. Omar is like, you're sat in your living room on your laptop. You could do this anywhere. And I don't, and he obviously, someone like Omar Samra who will climb Everest and cross the Atlantic
and he makes everything,
a hat.
He makes everything sound like so much fun.
And so easy, right? He couldn't obviously understand why I was being so dramatic about this. But I kind of, I relented and we went and we ended up spending a good couple of months just living this entirely different way of life on the beach with the kids running around in and out of the sea all day, working quite literally in this very kind of idyllic setup out of time. And that, just saying yes to that, and the results on my peace of mind and my sense of self and being present. I know generationally it sounds weird to a younger generation to hear this, but for me, I felt like, yeah, you know what? I have earned the right to say yes to things that have no other objective but to give me joy and to create opportunities for adventure and to create opportunities for new experiences.
Also, I think if you're such a structured person, I'm like that too. You end up thinking in the future a lot, not in the present. And that kind of experience is all about the present.
That's such a good point. My entire outlook in life had always been about what's next. You're stuck, you're on the beach in the middle of nowhere with someone like Omar Samra. And so you end up kind of, having these very idealistic conversations at 3 o'clock in the morning, under the stars, thinking you're going to live this incredible utopian life for the rest of your life. And obviously that's not the case. And obviously, yes, I have gone back professionally to a very frenetic way of life because that is the demands of the work. And that is, I have to work to live. I'm not doing this for fun.
But I also think that you thrive on that, which is a good thing.
For sure.
Yeah.
But at the same time, what I have managed to keep very consistent is this idea of saying yes.
Does that feel like it's something going against your character? Is that like against your instinct? Are you pushing yourself into that, or are you just letting it happen?
So my instinct is still to go, oh no, I don't have time. Or, oh, well, absolutely not. That's just not going to work right now. That's always my instinct. But now that I'm aware of it, I'm much more cognizant of going, okay, so that's how I feel. But I never once regretted it.
Yeah. The second icebreaker question is about your social media usage.
Yes.
And I'm kind of embarrassed to ask it, because you are the social media queen. In my mind, you are synonymous with Instagram, specifically Instagram.
Now I'm 100% team Instagram. Although I'm not on TikTok myself, I know work-wise I'm very, very excited about TikTok. Instagram is what gave all of our content platforms and all of our websites a different level of visibility that Twitter wasn't able to achieve in quite the same way. And now TikTok is actually doing the same for us. The numbers on TikTok are just incredible.
Tell me about your fascination with the Gen Z girls, and specifically the accounts you follow of these girls.
I grew up pre-internet as an Egyptian, as a Muslim, who in the English countryside, without any kind of access to an Egyptian or an Arab community, and outside of the incredible pride that my family would invest in us being Egyptian, no sense of identity. So for me, it is fascinating to see Arab women and Egyptian women, third culture Arab women, even those who are part of the diaspora, use this platform in a way that is really dismantling what it means traditionally, what it means to be an Arab woman, what it means to be a Muslim woman. It's incredible for me because there is a bravery and a fearlessness in embracing their identities in ways that we would never have dreamt of even doing. They are fearless when it comes to talking about sex. They are fearless when it comes to talking about sexuality, about gender, about religion, about identity, about nationality, about boundaries in ways that we'd never have imagined doing. And so you have, if you talk about specific accounts, you have someone like Salma El-Wardani, who is an incredible writer and broadcaster, just, released her debut novel. She is half British,
And
half Egyptian, born and bred in the UK.
Do you think that's part of the ability, that the fact that they are not based here or that they are half something else?
Yes. But there's plenty of them who are based
Who
in
are
the Middle
local.
East, who are just as fearless.
Yeah.
And so there's someone like her who sees no dichotomy in talking about sex freely and also talking about her identity, her religious identity.
I also think this is how you begin to break down prejudice.
Exactly.
By having these sorts of conversations out in the open.
Yeah.
And it shines a light in a place that has been there for decades, but was always hidden.
Oh, absolutely. And it makes, the reality is for such a long time, Arab women and Muslim women were not represented in any sort of media in a way that was real, in a way that was accessible.
Or just very simply nuanced. It's not black and white.
Exactly. You were either the good girl virgin or you were the whore.
Exactly.
What these women are doing is showcasing the nuances. And then, on the younger end of the spectrum, there's an entire generation of Gen Z girls. You have in Egypt, you have something like Zaina, whose account is called Catcalls of Cairo. And she is fearless about being a very vocal activist about things that matter to women, things that matter to women in this country and things that matter to women in this region. You have this whole group of girls, unfortunately it's defunct now, so I stole them all and took them to Mo4. But you have this whole group of young women who had worked on a publication called Teen Times, which was led by a girl called Fadila.
And she's now with you at Mo4.
And she's now, I waited 4 years for that girl to graduate.
That's hilarious. So you were tracking her.
Oh yeah, so she reached out to me very early on, and I was just obsessed with what she was doing.
But tell me, how do their parents react? How many of these girls' parents are on board, are supportive? Are they going against the grain? Are they from a liberal family?
Look, it goes without saying, and I think we've always got to be very aware of and cognizant of privilege when we have these conversations. So it goes without saying that there's a part of their confidence that comes from having the privileges of education and social structures that enable them and empower them to do so.
And a comfortable life to a certain extent.
And a comfortable life to do that. You don't have the capacity to think about these things and to be an activist for these things if you have very pressing issues that you need to deal with. But at the same time, there are people who cannot afford the fearlessness to use their voice in that way, But seeing that and having access to that, and everyone has access to these stories now because of social media, is important because it makes you feel seen, and it makes you realize that even if the people immediate to you are telling you you are wrong for being a certain way or thinking a certain way, that might not necessarily be the case. And I think what these girls do, whichever generation they're from, is by using their voices so fearlessly, is open up a space to let women think, maybe this is possible for me, and maybe this is okay too for me.
So tell me about some of the other accounts that you follow that you're really into. I
Yes,
think
so
some.
I'm a big content junkie. I'm a big news junkie
Yeah.
and lifestyle content junkie. So I will also follow. So I follow the New York Times, I follow the New Yorker, I follow the Times. Don't always agree with everything, but I love consuming content like that. I love reading. I love, just everything that I can consume. The Economist or Wired or TechCrunch or Vanity Fair, all of it.
And do you follow any accounts about the writing process itself?
Yeah, so I follow, it's a very, very old literary publication, the Paris Review. And I remember even like in my very early career as a writer, there's a whole volume of books called the Paris Review Interviews.
I'm really interested in this idea that your concept of Egypt when you were growing up in the UK was very different to what was the reality when you finally did move here.
So the Egypt of my childhood was two things. So obviously growing up in England, there was this very exotic view. It was the pyramids and the pharaohs, and I was obsessed with ancient Egyptian history. And I would buy up all of these books about ancient Egypt. And then there was obviously the Egypt of the summer holidays, which is, grandma and my aunts and Izba and this sort of that
Yeah.
Egypt, this very family oriented محشي الملوخية
Yes,
Egypt,
yes.
which is wonderful and it's idyllic and it's amazing and it's a core part.
It's your childhood comfort.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It is. And then obviously you grow up in the West and and then in the early 90s the Gulf War breaks out and then the Middle East becomes war and terrorists and these horrible ideas about what it means to be Arab and what it means to be Muslim, constantly bombarding your sense of self.
Did it change how British people perceived you as you were growing up?
So,
Or not really?
Malak, maybe it did and
Yeah.
maybe it didn't, but it wasn't ever something that we talked about. So
Yeah.
it wasn't ever something that I was cognizant of. I grew up at these type of Harry Potter style schools where I was the only foreigner.
Yeah. I was in one of those type of
right.
schools
So you
too.
understand.
Yeah.
So it's in hindsight, I can see maybe where there were issues, but I knew nothing else. And I didn't have things like social media telling me to be aware of other things. And so I just took it for granted as that's the, other than the very superficial things about like hating my curly hair and my big bum and all of this stuff, right?
Yeah.
So it's funny, I have cousins, direct cousins in the States. And I think it's an American British thing. They have this mentality of we're American with Egyptian heritage.
Yes. It's very different.
But it's very different, I think, in England, and whether it's a different type of immigrant in the UK. Also, I'm third generation living in England. Maybe that was part of it, but it was very much احنا مصريين. You are Egyptian and we are proud to be Egyptian. And yes, you have this British passport and yes, you have a British nationality, which affords you certain, when you get to be educated here, that is a privilege and you're very lucky, etc. But none of this is as amazing and wonderful as being Egyptian with our 7,000 years of civilization and we invented everything. So I must have been 16 when we first got the internet in the house, which is super ages me. And I remember, and so it was Ask Jeeves or Yahoo or something. And the first thing, you have this box that is telling you to
type something in.
Type something, search for something. And the first thing that I searched for was the word Egypt. And I put in the word Egypt because, I wanted to connect. I needed to know. I needed to connect to something or someone that would make me understand my identity more. I was desperate to have a connection to this thing called Egypt that had been made so big in my mind.
But I find that really interesting because I wonder whether that's connected to your imagination and your desire to write. Were you, when you were in your teens, were you writing just for the fun of it?
Nope.
You weren't.
And I wasn't one of these kids who kept a diary. or
Okay.
anything. But what I and this is, I only realized this many, many years later. Anything that I succeeded at, whether it was exams or essay writings or getting my first jobs when I was younger, like at university, I did so because of my writing. Because I would have to write an essay, or I would have to write مش عارفة إيه, expressing something or other, or I would have to write a personal statement. And I found those things, they came to me very, very naturally. Like there was a constant voice in my head that I didn't realize was a writing voice.
And did you derive satisfaction from that, or did you just think it's a means to an end?
At first, I thought it was a means to an end. And then what happened is, so I studied business at the University of Bath. And it was a 4-year sandwich course, meaning you did 2 kind of internships or work experiences. And I ended up for 8 months at the University of Texas in Austin. And I would email my experiences. So I would just start emailing my friends list, a mass email going, oh, and this happened today, this happened. I would write these like long emails. And then the strangest thing started to happen is I would get replies from people who weren't on my email list.
They would forward them on.
So these emails were being forwarded on, going, oh my God, this is so funny. Or what she says about, this experience, I totally relate to that. I had the same experience. And that's when I sort of pegged that there was something going on here that I wasn't so cognizant of before.
And what did you feel about that? Were you excited about that?
Yeah, and I got really into it. Yeah. And then my mom was like, you're Amy, you're a writer. I'm like, that's such a big word.
I want to stop you there. Did you find yourself changing how you wrote, knowing that other people were reading it?
Not back then.
Not back then.
And I'm sure you've experienced this as a journalist or writer. That is the most amazing space to be in.
Yeah.
Before you become wary, the worst thing that happens to you is when you become aware of your reader.
Absolutely.
It kills the soul.
You're perceiving how they're perceiving you.
Exactly.
It's very difficult.
It's very different than not at that stage at all. It would be years before I began to be much more cognizant of that. And mom would say, Amy, you're a writer. Amy, you're a writer. Amy, you're a writer. I'm like, that's such a big word, mom. It's just because you're my mom. You have to do that. And then I started getting jobs. Like I started getting really cool opportunities because of my writing. And so I started to see the pattern. I'm like, okay, maybe this is a thing.
Yeah,
maybe this is what I know how to do. And so that was what put it in my head.
So despite a degree in business, Amy embarked on a career in writing, and coupled with her intense desire to explore her Egyptian roots, she began working at Enigma magazine in Cairo. We'll get into that right after this short break. Welcome back. I'm Malak Fuad, and you're listening to What I Did Next, and this is my conversation with Amy Mowafi. I want to know a little bit about how you got into Enigma. For me, Enigma was how I discovered you. And I remember your column on the back page. This was before you became managing editor.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about how that came about.
At some point during those 4 years of university, I'd visited Egypt for a little while, and it was the first time. So Enigma magazine was launched in 2000, and so maybe I had seen one of the very early issues. And I remember I picked up this magazine. I was fascinated, Malak, by the world that was in this magazine. And by the way, I don't mean the high society world of it. I mean, it was spotlighting successful young Egyptians doing amazing creative things, musicians and actors and business people who are incredibly successful and who were in that magazine were the stories that I had not been told. And when I searched for Egypt on Google, those were the stories that I had never imagined seeing. And it had a tremendous impact on my imagination.
It was also, I think, the what you were seeing reflected the life you knew in the UK. It was the mirror of that, right? Because it was the same sophisticated milieu of people doing the same kinds of things you would come across in the UK.
Yes.
So for you, you weren't expecting that, right?
Yeah. I didn't. It was a side of Egypt that I would not, because Egypt was just a few weeks here and there.
Yeah.
Summers, Easters, whatever. It was a side of Egypt that, again, it's a bubble, but it was a side of Egypt that I was completely unaware even existed. So when everyone was looking for jobs, I thought, you know what? I am going to email Enigma. And I emailed and I didn't get any response. And I called and I didn't get any response. And I called and I called and I called like a mad woman. And eventually I got through to someone. Her name was Laila. She used to be the deputy editor. And she was like, okay, can you fax through a writing sample and your CV? I faxed
I love
through.
it. You're faxing
Yeah,
it.
I was faxing. Again, you see,
Yeah.
this goes back to the
Yeah.
floppy disk. You know, that's
Exactly.
why I'm not playing with TikTok,
Exactly.
but I got no response. So eventually, they must have taken pity on me, but I got a call going, okay, so you can meet the Yasmin Shaheta, who is, of course, still the owner of Enigma. I grew up with Vogue. And I used to rip out pages of Vogue magazine and put them on my wall. This was my obsession. And now here's this Egyptian woman who is just as glamorous and beautifully dressed and holds herself in the same way as these women who I had looked up at magazines in England, who I had idolized. And it was just incredible for me. And I remember she offered me, she offered me £2,000 a month on the spot. But obviously I would have to move to Egypt. And I was like, done, done. That decade was between 2002 to 2012 was really the best decade of my life. It afforded me opportunities and experiences and a community and access.
Yeah. You got to know everyone in town.
I got to know everyone.
Yeah.
That was that magazine was the way that was opened every single door at the time.
At the time. And you also developed your skills as a writer.
I developed my skills as a writer, as an editor, as a journalist, as an interviewer. And so a few years into my experience at Enigma, I pitched this idea of writing my own column that talked about my experiences, these incredible experiences that I was having as a young single woman living in Egypt and trying to straddle this divide this divide between East and West, which is a stranger thing to navigate when you are back in the homeland and you discover that these traditions that were so tightly held onto within your home because you were the other are not so necessarily tightly grasped in your own country. And you begin to think, wait a second, I was told I wasn't allowed to do that.
That's really interesting that you saw it from the other side. Yeah.
I was like, wait, why are people drinking?
Yeah.
Why are girls having sex?
And you're...
Why am I a virgin? Why have I wasted my time?
I remember that column so well. I remember it for two reasons. First, it was a very big breath of fresh air. It was extremely well written, which my experience of reading anything in Egypt was never well written. I go into a restaurant and I read a menu and I want to take out my red pen. It just drives me insane.
I know.
So it was extremely well written, including the whole magazine, actually, I have to say. And secondly, it was just like Sex in the City for Egypt. And it was so refreshing. It was amazing.
You know, it's funny though, because by comparison, we talk about these Gen Z girls on Instagram.
Yeah.
By comparison, it was so tame.
Yeah, but I mean,
at the time,
at the
like you
time,
said,
it wasn't.
At the time,
At the time, it wasn't.
no one was telling these stories openly. And so at the time, it was considered brave.
Were you criticized for that? Did a lot of people criticize you at that time?
It was, you've got to remember again that this was before any sort of before social media in the way that it was now. And so I didn't have that kind of feedback loop and cycle that I might have had now. It was years later when people would meet me and would tell me about their experiences with the column, which then became the book, their experiences and the conversations and what their parents were saying and what they were saying, or that I began to be cognizant of the impact these stories were having.
But luckily you had already passed that phase.
Yeah.
So that didn't matter.
Didn't matter.
Let's take a break and talk about your brothers.
Yes.
Because this is a natural
yes.
progression into the next phase of your life. So you have three younger brothers.
Yes.
You have Adam,
Walid, and Timmy.
And Timmy's real name is what? So tell me about your brothers and how you interact with them.
So there's actually a big age gap. So between me and Adam, there's 6 years. I'm the oldest. And then there's a 7-year gap or an 8-year gap and then a 10-year gap. So growing up, it was a bit of a weird dynamic because it wasn't growing up in the sense of احنا متربيين مع بعض, because obviously there was that big age difference. I think it is one of the greatest privileges of my life having my 3 brothers, because it gives you a tremendous sense of security. You have your own little army.
With you at the head.
As long
You're
as
the general.
as long as I'm the head, Malak, then we're all good.
The world is right.
Then the world is right. The reality of it is that it's because we run a business together, it is incredibly messy, and it is incredible. You know, people always ask, well, how is it running a business together? And it's always such a difficult thing to answer because of the nuances of it. And there are vicious fights because we're siblings. So there are no boundaries, right? You don't have any of those professional boundaries. We're so much better now. We've been working together for a decade now. So we're so much better now than when we started. But there are no boundaries to stop you from saying anything. But then the benefit of that is that you know the next morning it's water under the bridge. And I'm not worried that anyone is going to actually screw me over. I mean, who knows? Do you watch Succession?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so I'm obsessed with it.
Yeah, I love that show. But it's the Murdochs, isn't it?
I know.
Yeah.
I know, but I'm obsessed with it. And I always say, when we have these horrible fights, my brother's like, just, it'd be so great if we were just having this fight on a yacht instead of Tahrir.
You're Shiv.
Yes. And sometimes these things will happen.
Yeah.
Like, I'll watch an episode where a contract will have been signed behind her back. And it gives me so much anxiety because this shit happens,
Sure, of
right?
course it does.
With the best of intentions, or maybe not. But it happens all the time.
That's hilarious. But so when you were growing up, you felt responsible for them? You felt like the mom in a way because you had an age difference, right?
Yes. I kind of by default took on that matriarch role. And also my teenage years, I wasn't very rebellious.
Right.
I really towed the line and I was a geek. And I took all of these lessons that all parents teach to their kids, but then also, complicated by heritage and religion and culture, very much to heart.
Plus you were the eldest.
Plus I was the eldest. And I took them to heart in a way that they never did. Although my parents never differentiated in our upbringing between girls and boys, I just took it to heart more. And so I, by default, kind of took on a very maternal role of dal sah, dal sah.
Yeah. So I want to know, obviously, I know that Adam was the one who pulled you away from Enigma.
Yes.
So tell me how that happened.
So Adam has always been an entrepreneur. By nature, since he was 16, he's been starting such a hustler, starting a variety of businesses. And so he came to visit me in Egypt. So it was long before the revolution. And there was the Shakira concert happening at the pyramids. And the process of us getting the tickets was such a mess that Adam had the idea of setting up an online ticketing platform. And so it was the very first digital ticketing platform in Egypt. Once he had founded Tazkarti, he then realized, he's ticketing the events. Maybe the next stage is to cover these events. So he founded CairoZoom, which was revolutionary. It's funny because Enigma, one of the most successful things in Enigma was the back pages where you would have society pictures, right? But they were very posed and they were very curated. And obviously they would come out a month later because it's a monthly publication. And so Adam did this very disruptive thing where he hired a bunch of very young university kids to go into these parties and take candid photos. Parties in Egypt had never been showcased publicly in that way. Ever in the media.
The 2011 revolution was a turning point, not just in Egypt, but in the region as well. From Amy's perspective, it changed the way publications like Enigma approached stories.
What am I supposed to talk about? Because Enigma it's not a news publication, and it's not our place or position to tell these very important stories. Obviously, Yasmin as a businesswoman understood that she had advertisers and contracts and a publication had to come out. I didn't understand those responsibilities at the time. All I understood was, how am I supposed to do a public? How? I don't know. I am not trained for this. I'm not a news journalist.
I'm programmed to cover celebrities.
Yes. I know how to interview celebrities and artists and business people doing really nice things and pretty places.
Pretty things
and pretty places. And so I got stuck. So what I did is I took one of the Enigma photographers and I went into Tahrir celebrity spotting. And I would look for celebrities to take photos of. And then I did a whole feature.
And there were a lot.
And there was a lot. And I did a whole feature where all of these celebrities, we did a beautiful picture of them and they would, and then a picture of them in Tahrir and quotes about how they felt about the revolution. That was my solution. And then and for the cover feature, I did an article called the Twitterati, where I was very involved with Twitter, and I could see that there was a few young people who, because of their voice and the power of their voice, were able to get attention. I put them together and I did a photo shoot with them, which was, in hindsight, a ridiculous thing to do because
You want to remain anonymous?
no, they were happy to do it.
Okay.
It just didn't go very well because I don't know how to do anything. I mean, I'm trained to do fashion editorial shoots, right?
Did you dress them up?
No, I didn't. I didn't dress them up. I knew enough not to dress them up.
Hilarious.
But kind of, I did take them to the studio of this very famous fashion photographer at the time. Didn't go very well at all. At all. But these are the Twitterati, the young faces, the young people changing Egypt.
Yeah.
And we did a fashion shoot called I'm Egyptian, What's Your Superpower?
Yeah, I love that. But it's amazing because with that one cover, you announced the death of one world and the beginning of another. And it was serendipitous because it also catapulted you into your next phase. But tell me, Amy, when you did go and join Adam, did you realize that you were leaving the writing world behind? I don't want to talk, I'm not thinking so much about the structure of Enigma, of a company, an established company, but the writing, because you were clearly enjoying that. And it was where you were.
That was my passion.
It was your passion and it was your foundation. Did you feel that were you consciously leaving that away?
I wasn't. I really thought, essentially, it was CairoZoom was media, and part of what I was, and we knew we would launch, and we were in the middle of launching CairoScene, which was more of a blog format suitable to the time. And so in my mind, I was doing magazines, but digitally. I had no idea what the implications of that would be. I had no idea how innovative we were being. I had no idea how quickly the company would grow. I had no idea that off the back of that, we would become a social media agency.
And it was at the time just you and Adam?
No, it was me and Adam and Walid and Timmy. So Walid and Timmy joined Adam before I did.
Oh,
yeah,
they
so
did.
Not a lot of people know that. So actually, it was the three of them, and I was the latecomer. But it wasn't called Mo4. It was Taskarti and CairoZoom as businesses that they were working on. And then I joined latest, and I was like, no, let's make it a proper company.
It properly.
I wanted to call it Mofo, and then I was vetoed, and I was like, well,
I'm glad they vetoed you.
I had no long-term vision apparently, but and then I called it Mo4. Which is I was like,
it's very cute.
It also still works.
It's very cute.
So when I started, and we were self-funded, we had no outside investors. The office was my apartment. It was just ludicrous what we were doing, and we had 2 developers. That's it, 2 techies, and just the 4 of us. And the first day I went in, I'm like, what have I done?
Yeah.
And I started working my contacts in order to sell banner ads.
And did you feel even then responsible for your brothers, and that it was on you to make this work?
Yes. I felt a lot at the time. It's very different now, but at the time I felt it was a lot on me and Adam to make it work. And we were coming at it from very different. Adam's an entrepreneur, and I was a creative, I was a storyteller. And because we had no outside investment, in order to push these websites, we were using Facebook profiles at the time and Twitter. And we were being very creative and very cheeky and very cool. So when I started to go to sell banner ads, the clients I was meeting would say, yeah, whatever, but this thing that you're doing on social media, we don't really understand social media, and we're getting pressure from abroad that we need to have our own social media accounts. Can you do this? I was like, what, you want to pay me to post on Facebook? They were like, yes. I'm like, okay, all right. We had to say yes.
And did you find that, let's say a company like, just as an example, McDonald's would hire you, but they would also keep alongside their traditional advertising company.
And so that happened for years. That was the case. So for years, whether it was, Coca-Cola was one of our first big FMCG clients. And for years, it would be the case that we would walk into the boardroom, and, the creative agencies would be the people with muscle in the room. At the very end of the talk, they were like, okay, cool. So now we're knowing what you're doing. Facebook, what are you going to do with Facebook? And it would drive me crazy. And I remember very early on getting so frustrated by this. And there were some of the big shots and sitting in this room and saying to them, if you don't understand that you have to put your digital strategies first, you're going to be dead in the water, because you will not be advertising on TV very soon. And I was laughed at. I was laughed at. Now look at us, right?
Yeah.
Now look at us. I say the same thing now when people are, think we're being crazy talking about Web3 and crypto and NFTs and metaverse. People are going, what are you doing? I'm like, it's the same thing. You guys laughed us out of the room when we said television advertising would be dead. And the tables, it was incredible how quickly the tables shifted, that everything became digital first. But my God, Malak, we worked harder than anyone can. It was 24/7. We sacrificed everything.
And Amy, how do you and your brothers divide it up? Who's responsible for
So
what?
now, before it was very messy, but now we're very clear. So Adam is business development.
But what I mean is he's responsible across all, so it's a lateral position.
Across all of, for now,
Yeah.
across all of those sectors. For a long while, I was mainly focused on the agency, which I had to be because that was the revenue driver, but it killed my soul.
I can imagine.
It was
because there's
horrible.
you're just a manager at that point. There's no creativity in it.
Yeah, and I'm not built for.
You're an administrator.
And I'm not built for client work.
I can't see you doing that full time.
I was
How long did you do that for?
Until recently, until after the pandemic.
Oh, really?
So, and the entire time I was like, I can't believe I have these magazines, and that's not my main focus every day, because this is my passion and it's my skill set.
Exactly.
And I kept saying, if I could take the media, I can flip that. Not only did I want to flip that because that was my passion point, but because, and industry people hate me for saying this, and they hate because I'll say this in panels as well. I think, Malak, that every agency, traditional, digital, whatever that you want to call it, we're all living on borrowed time.
What do you mean by that?
Because every single person now has the tools in their hands to tell their stories and to own their stories in ways that are unprecedented.
The intermediary is not necessary.
The intermediary is entirely unnecessary. And we are just squeezing out the last drops of revenue that we can. And I am not willing to be like those people who sat in the room and laughed at the idea of television being dead for advertising, because I'm scared.
So tell me about how you're looking to the future to ensure that Mo4 doesn't become a dinosaur.
Yes.
What are your next?
So two things. So our big refocus on the media and the big expansion, the aggressive expansion that has happened on the media, is because I believe what people will always need is, even if they're able to create their own message, they need someone to amplify that message for them. And the media is that mouthpiece, right? So whatever happens, I'm talking in terms of advertisers, not in terms of pure storytellers. Advertisers are going to need the space, right? That space is not television anymore. They need to go to someone who can tell their story and make it reach millions of people. And that's what we do essentially from the business side of Mo4 Media. And so I understand that expanding that aggressively is my methodology of survival as a business. And so I'm also focused no one in the Middle East does what we do in terms of digital media. And so I'm very focused on us now expanding our portfolio into the Middle East. On the other side, we're also looking forward in terms of where is digital going? And, and this is, we believe that this is the last days of Web 2, and we are on the precipice of the Web 3 revolution, and everything that will bring with it. What will it bring? Who knows? But we're big believers that the technology on which this is founded will be revolutionary in the same way that internet versions 1 and 2 are revolutionary. They will change the way we trade. They will change the way we create communities. They will change the way that we own our content and own our identities. And that's very important.
Tell me as well about the e-commerce.
Yes.
It's called Botit, which I love the name.
It's called Botit.
Tell me about that.
BOTIT.
Yeah.
We just finished the tagline on it. It's everything now is the tagline. Or Botit got it, one of them. Anyway, so the idea is, so it's purely AI driven. It's a purely AI-driven e-commerce app. It's very important to realize that a lot of previous apps would say that they were AI-driven, but essentially it's just a pumped-up call center.
Mm-hmm.
This is truly AI-driven. And we have been very fortunate because of this network that we have built, that we have quite literally thousands of vendors on this app of the biggest international and local brands.
So presumably they are from the Mo4
way beyond
database,
the Mo4, but obviously we have the access of Mo4.
Yeah.
So it's quite literally thousands of vendors. So you can go on there and you can go You can go, I want, eggs and a loaf of bread for my grocery shopping. I want a new pair of jeans, packet of cigarettes, and a canoe and
Yeah.
whatever.
So it's like being in a mall and getting everything in one shot.
And then the way that the UI is done, it's single screen. So you're not toggling between different brands and then going into different vortexes. So you can literally go, yeah, that's the packet of crisps that I want. That's a top that I want. And those are the jeans that I want. No one does that. One of the funnest things that I find is that I can order a top from a high street brand and at the same time something from one of these cool Egyptian independent labels who don't have any logistical facilities. And it comes to me at the same time.
And so you're giving them a shop window that they wouldn't have, which is great.
Exactly. We've self-funded this, right? So we, until we're taking it to market, it's completely self-funded. And everyone who has heard us trying to do this, the first thing that they go is, yeah, but you won't be able to afford the marketing spend and burn that these other apps have. Most of these other apps use that marketing burn and spend with me. When they came to
So
Egypt.
you know what they're spending.
We launched Uber in Egypt.
Yeah.
We launched Glovo in Egypt. So that power was built in-house. And then, and the media is great. The media, again, this mouthpiece of the media, because the reality you can go, hey, look at this cool independent brand that just launched a new collection. You can buy it on Botis.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so all of these, so, subhanAllah, Malak, you never... Again, it was CairoZoom and Tazkarti.
Yeah.
And you just start.
And it just started.
And you fight. And,
exactly.
And it's also, I think it's also a big... I've never thought we're the most talented in the room. I've never thought, maybe we don't necessarily have the best ideas or the most creative ideas.
Very hardworking.
We are resilient.
And hardworking.
Yeah. And I think our secret power has always just been our work ethic and our resilience, because we just refuse to give up. Revolution, we don't give up. Devaluation, we don't give up. Another devaluation, we don't give up. Pandemic, I lie face down on the floor crying a lot, but we still don't give up.
Yeah.
And just doing that consistently.
And it's little steps every day.
All of these little steps bring together phenomenal opportunities. I never would have imagined 10 years later sitting here talking about Web3 and e-commerce and leverage.
I think what you're saying is fair, but I also think you're shortchanging yourself a little bit. I think you and your brothers have also taken risks, but I also think that you are, as a family, as siblings, looking ahead. And because you're already in the space, in a big picture way, you are looking at what are the trends coming our way, what's going to happen next. And I think Egyptians generally are huge consumers of everything, first of all. And they're quite early adopters.
Yes. Very true. Very true.
Very important. And everyone has a mobile phone.
Everyone has a mobile phone. Everyone.
Yeah, it's so,
amazing.
Why not? The sky's the limit, I want to talk back to your writing. And I want to know, because I know that in the last few months, you've been writing these stream of consciousness kind of posts on Instagram. And they're clearly too long for Instagram.
Yes, for sure.
But that's the medium you've been using.
Yes.
Do you see yourself, and I think you probably do, but maybe not now, not necessarily taking a step back from what you're doing, but carving more time for that, for the actual writing and doing it? Firstly, what medium would you do it in? Because I think you'll say, yes, I want to write. I'm sure of that. But what would be your medium? Because you're clearly no longer a paper and pencil kind of gal.
So it is my absolute dream to focus on my writing. It is my joy. It is my happy place. It is the thing that comes most naturally to me. And it is my greatest regret that I have 10 media publications and I write for none of them because I have to run a business. And so I have a fantasy of running away and living on a mountain somewhere by myself writing. There's a part of my motivation for doing things like the e-commerce where it's a different financial structure that isn't so work intensive on a daily level, that maybe it will afford me the luxury and the privilege to be able to step back a little and take time for my writing. Because I know, and I don't mean this to sound arrogant,
But you know what you're good
I
at.
know I know I'm good at what I do with Mo4 because I work really hard and I'm passionate and it means a lot to me, especially on this media side. But I know where my special talent. You know, everyone has a special talent, and you're very lucky if you can figure what that out is. And I think it's ironic that I figured it out early and I was able to leverage it early, and then I stopped.
No, I don't think you stopped. I think you just put it on hold.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And you used it in a certain capacity.
Yes. So for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, Mo4 is built on storytelling, and that's what fuels it. And my ability to do that is what moves the business from the non-business perspective. And so I hope, what format though would it take? I don't know. Maybe I do more on Instagram. Maybe I write another book. I have another book in me. I have books in me.
I think
know
you have
I
more
do.
than one in you.
I have books in me.
But
I just need to.
Do you think because I wonder whether you might have a novel in you. Because so far, the work you've been doing has been very journalistic, personal journey, personal stories, observational.
Yeah.
Do you think you have a novel in you?
I've never tried. Maybe I do. But the thing is, I think you just, it's like when I'm on holiday, I write. If I've had a break, I write a lot because it needs a certain. I don't need to sound like about it.
It needs
it kind of needs a headspace, right? Because when you're running a business, especially, you wake up in the morning and immediately you get infiltrated and bombarded with needs and requirements and deadlines and pressures, and it's very difficult then to leave a space for your creativity to come through. And writing, as much as it is a creative process, it's also a job. You know what I mean? And you have to be committed to doing a discipline, and you have to be able to make time for that discipline day in and day out, which unfortunately I'm not afforded that time right now. And it is my dream to create it, and it is especially recently, I turned 42 last July, and it is one of the things that plays on my mind more than ever right now, because I'm much more cognizant of my age and of time running out. And, alhamdulillah, I still wake up with my health and my abilities, of not letting too much more time get wasted before I explore this thing that I truly love.
But Amy, I don't think you're wasting time. I think you're just adding layers of experience to what will eventually be material for your writing, and there's no such thing as wasted time. Everything is copy, right?
It is.
Isn't that the old saying?
Maybe I'll write like the Egyptian version of Succession, and we'll see which one of us gets pushed off the side of the
yacht. Kills who by the end?
Exactly. Because one of the siblings always gets killed,
to die.
Right? Yeah.
One goes overboard.
One always goes overboard.
Thank you for joining me today. If you've enjoyed the episode, we've got more from Amy, including more thoughts about social media and the upcoming Web3 world. You can subscribe in Apple Podcasts to get this bonus episode exclusively for our members. This episode of What I Did Next was brought to you by A&T Media with me, Malak Fuad, and is co-produced by Chirag Desai. You can follow us on social media for video snippets from our interviews and other updates. Just search for What I Did Next on Instagram, Twitter, and on LinkedIn as well. We'd be grateful if you could take the time to leave a review of the episode in your favorite podcast player. See you soon.